Being broken by my colleague Subhana Shaikh. RBI may consider tighter norms for unsecured loans by banks. Subhana, why? We just saw a bit of loosening from the Reserve Bank of India. What exactly is the source of concern?
Hi, good morning. So actually the RBI is preparing to introduce tighter norms for unsecured loans. Now this is because, it still is concerned about, the expected rise in delinquencies in this segment. And RBI also believes that, there is potential vulnerability in this segment. So what sources are telling us that RBI is actually nudging select banks to strengthen their internal policies, urging them to set stricter thresholds for granting unsecured loans. Sources have also told us that RBI is asking banks to cap loan amounts for borrowers based on their credit score and their ratings. So, as I said, this is largely because, of the concerns that they have and that still remain. Now, we have to remember that back in November 2023, the RBI had already hiked, risk weights on consumer credit that is given out by banks, to 125% from 100%. Now, this had brought down the pace of unsecured loan growth significantly. So with this, while many banks already have their internal limits, what RBI believes that, these policies should be clearly documented and closely monitored because it could ensure, robust risk management. And when the RBI goes for inspection, it could be easier for regulatory inspection for the central bank. So likely the RBI is also formalizing a draft notification around it, and sources have told us that it could come out within the next fortnight or so.
Okay. Subhana, just help us understand this in the context of the announcement that was made towards the end of February, where the RBI reduced the risk weight requirement for banks on consumer microfinance. That's of a sub-segment or a separate segment, is it?
That's a separate segment, Alex, altogether. They had they had rolled back the risk weights for microfinance loans and NBFCs. But the higher risk weights for unsecured personal loans still continue to remain.
Okay.
So this is the difference.
Okay. All right. Thanks so much for that clarification as well. So, important update coming through. Avinash, the question is, how do banks react? And we've seen overall, over the course of last month and a half, banks have been favored and they've moved up quite substantially. And a lot of people looking at PSU banks also very closely. What's your reading of this if it does come through?
No, I think, Alex, if it does come through, smaller banks like RBL Bank or typically the smaller private sector banks, typically even the small finance banks, I think there could be a little bit of volatility today. The larger banks, specifically if you talk about State Bank of India or maybe an ICICI Bank, Axis Bank, I don't think, this could be a major impediment for them. I think clearly the smaller banks like RBL Bank could be watched very closely. And if it does come about, then I think a certain amount of restrictions could come in, and that could actually, slower the demand, because unsecured loans have been a large part of smaller private sector banks. In fact, for the PSU banks like SBI, Bank of Baroda, Canara Bank, I don't think it's going to be any major negative. But for the smaller private sector banks, it could possibly be an impediment, and the markets could possibly react accordingly. So I think it's better to wait and watch for the full policy to come out, from RBI.
Okay. It sounds a bit confounding. Now, let's see. I mean, obviously, we've gotten these details after due checks and all, because that's something that we follow at a basic at NDTV Profit. But it'll be interesting to see if and when this happens. And before it happens as well, does actions preluding this lead to some bit of a capping of gains for NBFCs in particular? Though RBI in this case has said that they'll tell banks to do so, but NBFCs become the first port of call for almost anything negative in terms of regulatory action from the Reserve Bank of India in terms of loan forwarding.
But
so.